Hi, Chrissy. Welcome. It's very nice to meet you, and thank you very much for joining me. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome, and also thank you for being here. Chrissy, before we jump in, can you tell me a bit about yourself and how you discovered carnivore? How did it all start for you?
It's quite a long story, but I'm currently studying public health nutrition with Auckland University of Technology, and this has been a journey that's gone on for about 5 years. And I've learned a lot about nutrition. I've learned a lot about health, particularly ketogenic approaches to maintaining optimal health and reducing the risk of metabolic diseases. And I've learned over the last 5 years that the root of all disease is metabolic health. And this has brought me to carnivore because I'm a firm believer that the ketogenic diet is the best route to optimal health. And the best form of the ketogenic diet is the carnivore diet. I've had my own health journey. I've also had my own experience of producing my own food. And the irony is, if prior to doing my studies, if you'd have asked me 6 years ago, what would have been the best choice for health, I'd have gone vegan diet every time because it's better for the environment, it's better ethically, it's better for your health. And as I've gone through my journey of producing my own food and my postgrad study, that's completely flipped the way that I think about it. And I actually think that the carnivore diet is best ethically, it's best for the environment, and it is absolutely the best for health. And the proof is that my health has improved tremendously. I've gone from being a cancer risk. I've gone from being pre-diabetic. I've had IBS. I used to suffer from migraines. I've had anxiety and depression. And since I've been on the carnivore diet, that has all gone. And I feel so much better in myself. And, I was clinically obese. You wouldn't think, but like 2 years ago, I was obese. I was 97 kilos, and the carnivore diet got me down to 73 kilos. So that was a phenomenal weight loss. I feel so much better. I'm an endurance cyclist, and you think somebody who was training, for endurance cycle events every week would be as thin as a rail, and I wasn't. Despite all the hard training, I was still putting weight on, and that really inhibits your athletic performance as well. So I've got better in my health, I've got better on the bike, and I just feel so much better in myself since I became carnivore.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. A cyclist. Wow. Um, you mentioned ketogenic, studying this for like 5 years. So,
Mm.
what made you pretty much jump into carnivore? Is there like any specific reason why you jumped in to it?
I think it was because I was failing miserably on the keto diet. Uh, and I was still putting weight on, and I was like, what am I doing wrong? And the problem with doing the keto diet is that you've got to be calculating your macros all the time, and it's very easy to slip up and just eat a little bit too much carbohydrate. You think that if you're doing a whole food diet and you're focusing on whole foods, it's going to be naturally ketogenic, but it's not. And I just think, for me personally, I am just not very good with any level of carbohydrate. I even have to watch dairy intake, because if I have too much dairy now on the carnivore diet, my weight will start to go up. And it's just, I've got to be under that 10% carbohydrate threshold to achieve ketosis. And if I don't, the weight will start to come back on. And that's just me personally, that's my metabolism. So the only way that I can absolutely guarantee no fuss, no having to calculate macros all the time, is to do the carnivore diet and limit dairy to around about less than 500 grams a day. So most of my calories are coming from meat.
I see. Yeah, it seems like I've heard like the same similar experience with many carnivores where they talk about like when they're because they found carnivore through ketogenic diet also, where they say that
Yeah.
it is hard to manage, like doing this through keto. So they want to jump into the next level, which is carnivore, and then like pretty much all the cravings, and then like constant hunger, like all went away. So it became a lot more simplified and easier for them. So
and let's face it, it tastes better, doesn't it? You start sweet vegetables, why am I eating that? It's like there's no taste to it, and especially when I raise my own meat, so I definitely get the best tasting, most nutritious meat that you can get. It's purely grass fed. I don't put any antibiotics, any pills into my beef cattle, and people do take the meat from me. If I've got any left over, I pass it on to other people, and they all say, "Oh yeah, Chris, your meat is the best." And I've got my own hens as well, and the eggs that we get from my hens, people say that they taste so much better. And I know that the nutrients are so much better because these hens, they're pecking around on grass, they're eating the bugs, they're getting more protein in their diet. And we do feed them. We do feed them like supplementary meal just to make sure that they are well fed. But by and large, they're produced in the most natural way possible, and they're free roaming, and they're they have a great life to my chickens, and they give me some great eggs.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Also, Chrissy, you mentioned a couple of things that got better, like when you went on carnivore. Like things like you mentioned, you were pretty much obese from 97 to 73 kilos, IBS, migraine, anxiety, and then like taking meds. Like, was there like any specific health issue that you wanted to address because you jumped into carnivore?
Yeah, I've been on ovarian cancer watch for 10 years. So I've had ovarian cancer. The irony is that when I got ovarian cancer, I was more leaning towards a vegetarian diet. So my diet at the time would have been quite high in carbohydrate. There would have been refined sugars in there. There would have been quite a lot of seed oil in there. And that's because, I was conned into thinking that was the best way, that, you keep out the saturated fats, you put in the polyunsaturated fats. So, you feel a bit cheated when you get cancer. So that was in my early 40s. I got ovarian cancer. I had to have a partial hysterectomy to get rid of it. So they were keeping an eye on me for 10 years. And just prior to going keto, they found a growth on my remaining ovary. And they wanted to investigate it. And then COVID happened. And they dropped the ball. So after the lockdowns, we came out of lockdowns, I got a call from my doctor to say, hey, we kind of missed this, and there's a growth on your ovary. I was like, oh, okay, right, got to go back to the doctors. Now, in the intervening period, I had discovered a company called Precure, and that's really what got me into the postgrad study. And they were like promoting the ketogenic diet, the benefits of it. So I tried it. And I went back after 6 months starting the keto diet, and believe me, I lost a lot of weight then as well. Went back to the doctor, and whatever it was on my ovary had disappeared. And the doctor was like, oh, you avoided surgery. It's like, actually, no, I was proactive in something that improved my health. And that is why whatever it was, which they suspected was a tumor that was growing on that ovary, had gone. And I still carried on being monitored. And after I went on the carnivore diet, they discharged me. I had 2 years clear. So about a year into, I was 10 years clear. But my tumor markers were all over the place. My inflammatory markers, were still risky. So about 6 months into carnivore, I went and got tested again. And all my tumor markers, they were the lowest. My tumor markers were 9. And this, bearing in mind that the worst time in my health, my tumor markers were over 400. And 6 months into carnivore, my tumor markers were the lowest that they'd ever been at 9. And after that, they said, yeah, you're clear, no more risk. So yeah, I was discharged. And so as I'm aware, that nothing's come back. I've no further problems with that. So that has got to be the best thing, because cancer's scary. It's really frightening. So yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think ovarian cancer is pretty much like up there, when it comes to like the most dangerous. Does your doctor know that you were doing the carnivore diet, as part of
The,
your treatment?
the doctor keto. I've had some very interesting conversations with my doctor about cholesterol because believe me, my cholesterol my LDL was going up a bit, and before I went carnivore, and we were going to keep an eye on this. I'm like, okay, fair enough. Now I'm the sort of person that I don't wait to get sick to go to the doctors. I give myself a checkup. I get my bloods done every year, and everything, all my biomarkers have now gone into the normal acceptable ranges my doctor's happy with, but the LDL has gone up a little bit. Okay, it's gone up about 0.3 since I went on carnivore. It was, and that was from 3.6 to 3.9 it is now. So I went back to the doctor's, got my cholesterol test, and the doctor was, we need to have a conversation about this. So I was given the summons, but I went armed with a lipoprotein A test and my triglycerides and my HDL. And I'm like, well, actually, I'm not worried about my LDL at all. I did explain that I was on the keto diet. I think telling your doctor that you're on a carnivore diet, a bit iffy there. Yeah, maybe don't go that far. And, I said, I'm not worried about my cholesterol at all. I said, look at the context of my cholesterol. I also had my heart function tested. I had a pulse wave analysis. I wasn't quite bad enough to be sent for a CAC scan. But I went for pulse wave analysis, and the result was that my heart currently functions 15 years biologically younger than my chronological age. So I'm like, nothing wrong with my heart. Is that I have ECGs, and yeah, everything's coming out absolutely spot on, perfect. I'm fit. You cannot do a 160k endurance cycle ride if there is something wrong with your heart. You wouldn't finish. So went back and had the conversation with the doctor. She had to agree with me. I had a follow-up cholesterol test the next year, and my LDL was up, and the doctor was like, similar results to last year. So yeah,
Wow.
she couldn't argue with
Wow.
my case.
Yeah. You did your research like pretty extensive, and you went to this conferences to this pretty much study the ketogenic and then leading you to carnivore. Were you like was there any point were you ever like skeptic like before even trying jumping into keto or carnivore at all?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I went into carnivore with an open mind. I thought, I'm going to try this. And at the time, I'd not actually come across people like Sean Baker and Ken Berry. So it was based on my own reading, and it was based on my own research. But the unfortunate thing is that there's very little research on the carnivore diet, but there's absolute heaps of research on the ketogenic diet. And I know one of the researchers who is curing cancer with a ketogenic diet is Matt Phillips. Now, he's never actually said anything about whether or not he's carnivore, but I do believe that he has carnivore leanings, and he does have a predominantly carnivore diet. And I've seen him talk on stage, and not only have I seen him talk, he has brought his cancer survivors onto the platform to talk about how they were cured by a ketogenic diet. Now, unfortunately, in that kind of research, you don't get a lot of participants. You don't get a lot of people who see it through. And plus, it's the sort of study that, it takes a long time. You've got to work one-to-one. You've got to have your health coach there. You've got to work very closely and interact with the researcher. So you're not going to get one of these N10,000 studies that you get with pharmaceuticals. You're going to get an N12 study of people who have, as a last resort, they've been told to get their affairs in order, and they are, desperate people that have got the last chance at life. And these are the people that go into these studies, and 6 years later, they are still alive. Now, when you go to a conference and you see something like that, you're just like, wow. And that's what flipped it for me. I was quite skeptical about the ketogenic diet. I'm going back, 6 years when I started my my postgrad journey. And I started off doing a personal training course, and it's very run-of-the-mill, very mainstream, following nutritional guidelines. And I decided to extend my study, and I joined the Human Potential Centre at AUT. And the thinking there is just completely different. The whole ethos around diet, they're very into keto. So in terms of the research, I know a lot about the ketogenic diet. I know what research is out there. I know that it is not going to compete with the big studies that Big Pharma put out, and that's why Big Pharma wins, unfortunately. But we're slowly chipping away at it, and we're getting the studies, and there's like a plethora of studies that really show that ketogenic diets are optimal for health. Very, very quickly, I would have said that within 3 months. Now, I had come off a whole food diet, so I think the transition was a lot easier for me because I wasn't eating any rubbish. I wasn't eating any grain, seed oils, and I had a whole food diet anyway. So I was eating complex carbohydrates, not refined carbohydrates. So the transition was easy. And I would have said that the first month I did do gastrointestinal complaints. And I put the odd little bit of nuts in there just because of the nutritional transition. I know that carnivore diets are lower in some minerals like magnesium and potassium. So you've got to be careful about that, because until you completely transition, there is a risk. So I did take some electrolytes. But after about 3 months, I noticed there was a change. And my metabolism had adapted by then. So after 3 to 4 months, I completely came off any electrolyte supplements. Stopped eating anything that was non-carnivore. And I found after that I didn't have any problems at all. And in fact, if anything, I didn't really want to eat anything that was non-carnivore. I've had all my nutrient profiles done, and I do not have any nutritional deficiencies at all. You'd expect to see maybe some loss of potassium. Certainly in 2 years you would. And my potassium levels are absolutely fine. So this is telling me that when you are on the carnivore diet, and there is some research that backs this up as well, that your body adapts and your nutritional needs change, because glucose competes with nutrient receptors. So you need less. It's like vitamin C. Hello, I haven't got scurvy. And in fact, I did have some gum disease before I went carnivore, and that's now cleared up. So yeah, there's definitely no vitamin C deficiency, definitely no potassium or magnesium deficiency. It's all been tested, and nobody's worried on that score at all.
Wow, that's really amazing to hear. No nutritional deficiencies.
No, I've got the blood test to prove it. Yeah, and I don't look deficient either, do I?
Yeah, absolutely. Chrissie, so for me, when I look back at my own health issues, like I had so many assumptions, like what was causing it, like either maybe just genetics or aging or specific food that triggers, or it could just be stress. For you, like, did you have any assumption what was causing your health issues before you finding out about keto or carnivore?
I absolutely thought it was related to nutrition. I've known about that for a long time. Since my 20s, I've been aware of the importance of diet in maintaining good health. But the problem is that I believed the wrong stuff. I believed all the nutrient guidelines. And, I believed that cutting out meat was the way to good health. So I was following that. And then when your health starts to decline, there is an element of, oh yeah, maybe it is aging, but then you learn that chronic disease has gone up by about 400% in the last 70 years. And when you learn that actually that's when all the rubbish started coming into the diet, and you look at meat consumption hasn't actually changed that much over the last 70 years. but sugar consumption has, and seed oil consumption has. And I think that, one of the biggest criminals in humanity is Ancel Keys. Took money from the sugar industry to produce a bogus study that's underpinned nutritional guidelines ever since, and yet it has never been proven in any clinical study. And even the studies he did contradicted his own findings, because it was an epidemiological study that he did that showed in 7 countries there was a correlation between high saturated fat intake and heart disease. But when they actually delved further, they actually found that it wasn't the saturated fat that was doing the damage in those countries. And it was predominantly men as well. So, men were smoking, drinking, there were other things that were coming to play. And then, what about the other 15 countries where that pattern wasn't found? And I say this a lot, but Ancel Keys is responsible for more death than Hitler, Mussolini, Genghis Khan, Pol Pot, and all the worst dictators that have ever existed. It's caused more death and suffering. And now, I know that, we're treating things better, but, people are living the last 12 years of their life. About over 80% of the human population now live the last 12 years of their life under medical supervision, suffering absolutely terribly, having to go to the doctor all the time, having like joint pain, heart problems, and being worried and stressed about their health. And there's absolutely no need.
Yeah, I think this is very well said, Chrissie. I think this is some information like many people should hear, because this kind of like goes under the people's radar, because it's something that's not like easily explainable, for, especially regarding to what we eat, so. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that when I first started my study was that my tutors talked about the idiopathic death. And I think that one of the things that drives me more than anything else is that I want to die an idiopathic death. I do not want to be spending the last 12 years of my life in considerable discomfort. When I drop dead, I just want to drop dead. Okay? I don't want to be in a hospital. I don't want to be on a ventilator. I do not want to have things put in my arm, and that you're just sitting there waiting for it to come. My grandfather, the way he died was, probably the best. He just walked out of his bedroom one morning, and then he was, that was it. And that's the way to go. And, prior to 1970, that's the way that most people went. My parents, they suffer ill health, and my mum's always going, oh, it's no fun getting old. She's like in and out of the doctor all the time. It's like, I just do not want that. I want to still be cycling. The oldest cyclist I've ever come across when I've been out on my bike was over 90. I want to be that person. You see the 90-year-old gymnast. I want to be her.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Chrissie, for me, before finding out Carnivore, like my motivation was really like just about zero, I mean, I wouldn't say zero, maybe it's an exaggeration, but it's pretty much just like pushing forward. And then after finding out Carnivore, I feel so motivated. I'm able to appreciate life even more. Can you talk about your motivation back then? Like, because you did all this extensive studies with keto and then Carnivore, and then now, what is your motivation now?
I just want to stay in good health. It's interesting. My tutor is Grant Schofield, has just written a book called Choose Your Hard. And I think, 2 years ago, I was kind of on board with that. But now I'm thinking, actually, I'm just choosing my easy, because staying in good health is just so easy. And I don't have to think about it. I have to plan meals. I just have to get a steak out of the freezer and that's it. That's my meal for the evening. One meal a day. I don't have to eat during the day because I'm just never hungry. And when I do eat, it's more about, right, what nutrition am I going to put in my system today? It's not, oh, my stomach is rumbling, I'm desperate for something to eat. It's like, actually, it's much more motivated by what's going to improve my health today. What do I need so that I can do my exercise? I just want to make sure that I get enough protein into my system so that, I keep my muscle mass up. And that's just so much more easy now. And I just, since I've been carnivore, it's like the muscles have just come out of nowhere. They just grew with that. I don't weight train, and yet I can now sort of, lift my own body weight. It's just crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like, I don't even do as much training anymore. I used to do like CrossFit, play tennis like every weekends, but I'm still in good shape and not doing much workout, so I totally feel that.
Yeah.
Before, go ahead.
Yeah, it feels amazing, doesn't it? I just wish I'd discovered this, maybe 40 years ago. When it was far more important to be to be toned and slim and and curvy and 52, and I've got my curves back. Well, actually I never had curves, but I finally got curves after 40 years of really trying, and it's not even hard.
Yeah, totally. I feel the same way. I was like thinking like, oh, what if I found this carnivore like a lot early on, it would have been like a lot better too, but it's better than late than never. So yeah, I guess that's my only hope, right?
Yeah, and you can get away with it when you're younger, can't you? But you can't once you get over 45. It's like suddenly it's like weight loss used to be so much easier. It was so much easier to put it back on as well. But it's like I got to 45, and so it's like I'm trying all these diet techniques that I've been trying for years, and suddenly they're not working anymore. Oh my god! In fact, the diet techniques seem to be making things a lot worse. I mean, I did was it Libby Weaver's accidentally overweight, and I put weight on, I was like, what's going on here? So discovered low carb. It's like, well, that's what it is then.
Yeah. Wow. Chrissie, before going carnivore, what was your favorite food?
Good question. I did have a bit of a penchant for cheesecake. So the good thing is that there are carnivore versions of that. Like any dessert that was like creamy and chocolatey and tiramisu, stuff like that. I didn't really like cakes, I'm going to be honest. I didn't like crumbles. So that was my go-to dessert. So the good news is that I can still do a carnivore version of that. And I can still enjoy it once in a while.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen the recipes on YouTube. Looking back at the start of your carnivore journey before you, while you were doing your research, were there any mistakes you made? Maybe you can tell us like what and how did you learn from them?
I didn't make any mistakes. I did it right. right from the word go. I think, no, in all seriousness, I think maybe the mistake was too much dairy. And I did notice that I had weight loss stalls. And sometimes a stall could go on for a couple of months. And it's like, have I reached that point? And it was at the point where you're getting to your ideal weight. And I thought, I just could do a little bit more because I was conscious of my BMI. And I just thought, I'll just take the dairy down a bit. And that was the only mistake, really, was just eating too much dairy. And if I eat too much dairy, it will affect my weight. So I do limit that to 500 grams, but I think 500 grams of dairy is probably enough, actually, for anyone. Why would you want to eat more than that?
Yeah, exactly. So what does a typical day or week of eating look like for you now? Do you pretty much keep it consistent, or do you switch things up? I think some carnivores, they said they get bored, but not a whole lot. I think only some, but most of them like pretty much just have some kind of like a system, and then they just go with it. What about you?
Well, I think my life doesn't revolve around food anymore, and I think that's a real positive thing. So it's so easy that I don't have to obsess about food. My life is not about what I eat. My life is about what I do, my research, my work, my hobbies. And food is that thing that is there to sustain that. And then that's the important thing. And I'll come home and it's like, okay, which cut of meat am I having today? And it's as simple as that. And then I'll eat for sustenance, I'll eat for nutrition, and sometimes I don't even have to eat. So if I wanted to fast for a day, if I have a day where I'm particularly busy and I'm not at home, then I don't even think about eating anymore. I just think about doing what I do. So I suppose psychologically, when I get home, there is this kind of like, oh, it's eat time now. And that's when my mind goes into eating mode. But then after that, I don't have to worry about it anymore. So it's a one meal a day, get the steak on, get the chop on, get whatever I'm eating, and then that is it. And the other thing is I'm like saving so much money. People think, oh, meat's expensive. Well, something that is that satiating is not expensive. So it's a complete misnomer to think that, you're going to be having to fork out a lot for your diet. I've actually done a comparison because my partner's not carnivore, and we split up my shopping and his shopping. And his shopping was $50 more expensive than mine. And the other thing is he'll run out quicker than me as well. And the other thing is when you produce your own food as well, and you've got your own cow in the freezer. Yeah, it's just like, what am I getting out? Just delve through the freezer, right? Okay, so it's T-bone today. Then it's just at the top of the pile.
Yeah, I think that's a common understanding of many people who are not carnivore. Like they keep thinking that's going to be expensive, once you switch to this lifestyle. I think even some friends of mine say the same thing. Like the first thing they ask, how much is your grocery? And then I have to I always have to tell them that actually I have it wrong. I already have like a pre-planned response because I've heard it so many times that I just tell them I was completely wrong about this whole perception of grocery being expensive, and I just tell them the whole spill. So yeah.
Well, people don't actually think that when they're buying food, they're not thinking about price per calorie or price per nutrient. And I've done it because I work with adolescents, and I try and encourage them to improve their diet. That's what my research is all about. And, I look at, okay, well, let's see. So you get an up and go, right? And how many calories in? Well, it's all sugar, isn't it? But actually, if you compare that to, say, like a yogurt drink, a kefir or something like that, the price per gram of the kefir is lower. So if you look at your Weetabix and your milk for breakfast, if you had the equivalent weight in egg, it would work out cheaper. And of course, you've got the satiety factor on top of that. So that's where you're actually saving money. And I think it was Julia Rookledge who did some research on the cost of a healthy diet. And she actually costed up a healthy diet versus an unhealthy diet. And the healthy diet did actually come out cheaper. So it's a misnomer. And then when you factor in satiety, that wasn't even factoring in satiety. So you factor that in, and it's... I would say 30% cheaper, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you're right. Absolutely. Satiety is a major factor to that. I just never really thought about it, but you're right. Chrissie, so what is the hardest thing about being carnivore for you? Like, for me, examples would be like, social gatherings with family and friends, right? As with the travel, scouting foods like to the location where we're heading, or in the cravings in the beginning. It took me like a year to battle it. Also some skepticism from family and friends. What about you? What was the hardest thing?
No, I don't really find that difficult at all. So I'm going to do a comparison of when I was vegetarian stroke vegan, 20 years of like aspiring to be vegan and sometimes being vegan and failing miserably. I would go to gatherings as vegetarian stroke vegan, and I'd end up eating the meat. And I can remember one occasion, so there must be something there. There must be some draw that makes you want to eat meat. And the person was very accommodating. There's plenty of vegetarian food there, but he put out these lamb kofta balls. And he'd made them himself from a locally reared, grass-fed, totally organic lamb. And I just kept sneaking up and eating them. And then, of course, you've got to live with your conscience after that, because back then I was like, also like, you know, drawn into the bullshit of animal welfare and all that. And I was justifying this. Well, you know, it was an outdoor raised, grass-fed, organic lamb. Oh, the lamb had a good life, you know, so it's not that bad. It's not as if it was a factory farm animal that was pumped full of antibiotics. So, okay, conscience is clear. so yeah, so that was the other side of it. And of course, you get into carnivore and you look at the food and you're like, that's horrible. You know, there's no problems whatsoever. I could go to a social gathering and just not eat because it's just not even appetizing. Or I will look for the meat stuff, or, you know, there's bound to be some meat there, but I might not even have that. You know, I might put some to it. So, you know, some pastrami, and, you know, I'm careful about the sausage, because like, well, you know, you've got some sausages out there, but they're about 30% like non-meat ingredients. They've got, you know, plenty of fillers and seed oil, so I'm not even going to go there. And then the other thing is I'm thinking, well, you know, if I eat this rubbish, I'm going to fast forward to tomorrow morning when the scales are going to be up and I'm going to feel crap. So, yeah, I can just enjoy the gathering, and I just don't eat. People question. In fact, more people are intrigued by my carnivore, and they ask curious questions about it. You know, how do you manage? And I think, you know, I was out in the pub, and what I normally do is if I go out to eat, is that I'll get the meat meal, and I'll get the veg with it, and then I take the veg home and feed it to my pigs, because that's where it belongs, really, isn't it? Inside a pig, not inside me. So yeah, so I was like, are you actually going to eat some veg today? I'm like, nope, I'm going to feed the pigs with that. And then it's like, oh, but it's good for your digestion. I'm like, as an ex-IBS sufferer, I'll tell you now that is not good for my digestion. You know, it's like, you know, I probably, if I could digest it well, I'm going to take about 3 to 11% of the nutrients out of that. Like the rest of it is down the loo. That's where it goes. It's like, you know, eat the meat. I am going to absorb most of the nutrition in that. Okay, so yeah, bye veg. The pigs can have it. Because the pigs will turn it into something way better than this has.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Chrissie, if you had to describe the impact of carnivore in your life, what one word would you describe it, and tell me why?
Happiness. I feel so much more grounded. I handle stress better. I just don't even get stressed. I'll tell you that, like Friday, there was a bomb scare at my work. And, you know, we got the security coming around, knocking on the door. Hey, you know, there's a bomb scare. You need to evacuate the building. Everybody's just going, oh my God. And I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't even stress about it. In situations that, you know, 6 years ago, I would have got really panicky and anxious about, and would, you know, have kept me awake at night, and I'd have panicked and go around all day. Now I'm just like, yeah, you know, okay, Sarah. I'm like, yeah, I'm okay. I'm fine. And the other thing is, you know, the athletic performance. It's like, I just go out day after day on my bike and I don't ache. I can just go and do it. So it's like my recovery, the inflammation in my system is so much lower. And I can do more. I've got way more energy, you know, and that is happiness. I can take things, I can take or leave things. I just feel so more grounded and so better mentally adjusted.
That's really awesome to hear. I'm just curious about the whole cycling experience. How long do you ride your bike? Pretty much like when you go out.
I can do about 4 hours fasted. I haven't really tried to go along, but yeah, I can. I mean, you know, there's time constraints on how long. I mean, if I go and do an endurance event, then I might be out like 6 to 8 hours, depending on how much I want to enjoy the scenery. You know, I don't really race anymore. I go out for the experience. I go out for the ride. I don't really worry about, you know, like beating any times anymore. I used to do that when I was younger. But yeah, I mean, I have tried it out. I've done 120 kilometers without taking in any carbohydrate and just water. And the other thing is I wouldn't have had breakfast. So this is, I eat around about 4 o'clock every day. So if you imagine that the previous day I ate around about 4 o'clock and I got up about 9, 10 o'clock. I'm not going to rush out of the door. Got out about 9, 10 o'clock the following day, went out and rode for 4 to 5 hours and came home. Yeah, so that's what it looks like.
Wow. Yeah. I feel like, some of the carnivore who are also, doing physical sports that I've come across, like, I think they also do their cardio cardio activities like fasted. I think that's very strong similarities, like especially with the carnivore who are doing athletic type of activities. Wow. Chrissie, so knowing what you know now about carnivore and the nutrition, the lifestyle itself, if you can give an advice to someone just starting, or maybe because they have a chronic pain, they have a chronic issue, and they see how much success you've had with carnivore, but at the same time, they're super skeptical, thinking they're going to have a heart attack or some kind of heart issue if they pursue this road. What would you tell them?
Well, I mean, the first thing is that you don't actually increase your meat consumption much more than you were eating it anyway. So you're actually eliminating, you're not really adding. So that's the first thing. Yeah, it can be hard with there are some people like, oh, I don't want to raise my cholesterol. I don't want to. And they think, well, actually, you tell them that there's no evidence and it's up to them as to whether or not they want to investigate that further or whether they're going to believe you. And then, the other side is, oh, my doctor says. And, you can't really do much about that. But then, the other side of it is that I think the lure of health is much more powerful, because when I was like vegetarian stroke vegan, I converted nobody. But since I've been carnivore, I've actually converted a vegan to eating meat. And my colleagues at work, they're looking at their weight and they're seeing that as a much, much bigger risk factor. And that's one thing that I do tell them. Well, actually, most studies are showing that cardiometabolic disease is linked to obesity. It's not linked necessarily to meat consumption. That is much more powerful. And you're talking about increasing your risk of diabetes, cancer, heart disease by 700% if you are overweight, and we know that sugar's doing that. So my stance on that is, well, actually, if you reduce your weight, you are going to be reducing your risk by maybe anything up to 700%. Current studies on meat and cancer, meat and heart disease are looking at 18 to 27%, and that is in the worst epidemiological study. And then the other side of it is that, well, look, it's only colon cancer. And how many people in the world get colon cancer? Well, there's only 4%. So that actually means that 96% of the population who are eating meat are absolutely fine, and they're not. And then other cancers are not associated. So there's only a really, really small risk. So I think when people look at it that way, and it's like, well, actually, yeah, what you need to be doing is losing weight. And then they look at me, and I think that lure of, well, actually, you've lost so much weight, that is much more powerful. But one of the things that I do say to people is like, look, just don't go straight into it, because there is a risk that you will fail, because it is hard. And if you come off a diet that is high in ultra processed food and you go straight into a carnivore diet, you're going to have some serious problems. So what I would advise people to do first is just cut out the ultra processed food. For some people, that's actually enough. And they see weight loss, and it's like, well, hey, actually, thanks for your advice. I've taken your advice. I've lost a shed load of weight now. So I don't actually have to go full carnivore. Oh, well, that's absolutely fine. Great. But then there are some people, it's like, actually, yeah, okay, I've got to this point now. And it's like, well, what do I do next? And it's like, well, okay, just start taking the foods out slowly. And I've said on the previous interviews that I've had that it should be on a 3-week cycle. So the first thing you take out is the ultra-processed food, and you just get over that hurdle. Then 3 weeks later, maybe take the grains out, okay? And then 3 weeks later, take the nuts out, and then gradually eliminate until you are, only eating animal produce. And then see how you're getting on. Maybe look at how you're getting on with dairy. Are you going to have an effect if you reduce or eliminate dairy? But I mean, the other side, it is hard. It's like, it's tough and it takes a lot of discipline. And I'm going to admit there are some foods I'm thinking, well, maybe fruit, I think. I did enjoy fruit. And I know that is actually for me the worst thing, because it will spike my blood sugar up, and I will be, 20 minutes after eating a banana, I'll probably be in bed with a massive migraine, and it will probably take 48 hours for the blood sugar to normalize. In fact, I've actually done that experiment. I've tested my blood sugar after eating a banana, and it took 48 hours for my blood sugar to normalize after, taking no more carbohydrates after that one banana. So it's that versus, the taste versus feeling really crap, isn't it? It's like, you go out on a binge drink, don't you? And you regret it the next morning. Eating bananas is the equivalent of binge drinking for me. So it's just slow elimination, and it's like, I get it. It does the variety, and if you want variety in your diet, then maybe you don't have to go full carnivore, but you've got to see what works for you. And I can tell them the optimal way to lose weight and get into good health will be carnivore, but it's hard. It is that choose your hard, the book that my tutor wrote. And 2 years later, this is now my easy.
Wow. I really like your advice. I feel like it's really great, realistic, and, like the 3-week window, like to change things up after. I think that's really awesome. And also some really great information you talked about. I wrote some down here too for myself. So maybe after I review some of the things you mentioned. Chrissie, my last question to you is your future outlook. How do you see carnivore in the next 5 to 10 years? Do you see it being in a good light, or maybe in a bad light, or maybe both? Good light meaning more people wanting to learn about it, more people talking about it because they see a lot of healing. The bad light may be censorship in the media, or maybe false information about it, misleading information. What are your thoughts?
I think there will be a lot more research on carnivore, and it may be a direction that I take. I currently am involved with a community of around 100 carnivores on social media, and there's maybe a further like 40 or 50 in that community who are there because they're curious about it. So they want to make the change. I mean, I think there is definite growth in the carnivore diet. My main worry is that the powers that be in the World Economic Forum, in the UN, and lovely Mr. Bill Gates is going to be pushing to reduce meat consumption, and that is a big worry. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to live in New Zealand, where I think it's going to affect us less, but you can see that there's a drive in Europe to reduce the amount of meat that's available to people. That is a really big worry. But, that's just going to, it's just ridiculous, because they're talking about meeting climate targets, but what's actually going to happen instead is that meat production in Argentina, where it is a problem, is going to grow, so that's just crazy. So, it's not in my backyard stuff. So that is something that worries me. But meat production is still a growth industry, and it is still projected to grow. So that is a positive. So it's still going to be available to people. The other side of it also is like, thankfully in New Zealand, there is opportunities for people to produce their own food on a small scale, and as a meat producer myself, I've currently got five cows on my land. I've got one that I'm going to be using as a dairy cow, and I'm going to be producing more calves from that. So for me personally, I'm going to be supporting people who want to eat more meat by producing it, and actually producing it cost effectively. So I can provide that for people at a much lower cost than they would pay in the supermarket. Meat is going to get more expensive, so you're going to have to persuade people that actually, even when meat gets more expensive, it's not going to be out of reach, but that is going to be offset by the cost saving, as I've said before, by the satiety effect, and the fact that the nutrients and calories that you get from meat are going to be much better, per dollar than you would from plant foods. So yeah, it's going to be a challenge, and I think the movement has got to grow, and I think it's great to see that people like yourself, people like Dave Mack, people like Sean Baker are now really pivotal in getting the information out there, and more people are. It's a community that is growing, and I think it'd be good that we can fight back against this massive amount of misinformation that's out there about diet. The one that frustrates me more than anything else is the climate argument and the ethics arguments as well. Global food production, I'm not going to say that that it's squeaky clean and nice, but we have this absolute greenwashing of plant production over livestock production, and it's completely overlooked that some of the worst human rights abuses occur in global plant production. I am absolutely convinced that plant production is way worse for the environment. But unfortunately, you've got some very powerful and rich people bankrolling the organizations who are telling us what to eat and making these global policies. And that's a real concern for me. And we've got to fight back. We've got to get the information out there. We've got to tell them, no, actually, by eating meat, you're not wrecking the environment. And actually, it's probably the solution. One of the things when I come across people who put that argument across is like something like 12 million hectares of arable land are being completely degraded and desertified every year. There's a crisis in India that they're not able to produce the crops because, they're putting these chemicals on the land, and, chemically intensive crop production gives arable land a lifespan of about 70 years. If the world went vegan, we would probably be down to maybe 50% of what we can produce by the end of the century. Now, that is a lot of people are going to go hungry. Another thing, if you look at it, if you look at the statistics, the places in the world where there is the greatest level of hunger are in the countries that produce the most crops. Now, how is that happening? So what's happening is that Western demand for cash crops is taking food away. We have this completely ridiculous argument that, if we all go vegan, we can dedicate more land to food production and we can feed more people on less land. That's absolute rubbish. Now, what would happen is that actually the Western demand for cash crops would increase, and that would mean that even more food was diverted from these regions that, are suffering the greatest levels of hunger. More people will go hungry. So actually what we need to do is increase livestock production in countries like New Zealand, like the United Kingdom, like the United States. And, in New Zealand, we're not actually very good at growing crops. The land is really not suitable. And trust me, I've tried where I am to, be more self-sustaining. And, 6 years ago, before I hit on keto, I was trying to produce my own food, and the crops would just fail all the time. So there's land suitability. So if you look at like the fringes of the earth, almost like in Europe, New Zealand, we're much better at producing livestock, and yet the drive is to stop us from doing that. And that is just absolutely crazy, because what it's actually going to do is increase food poverty. When 20% of the world's population experience food poverty on some level, there's something wrong. You don't want to be reducing the amount of food by reducing livestock. You want to actually be like using livestock as that extra buffer. and the livestock that turn the waste products into much, much better nutrition, or they feed on land that you can't do anything else with. 70% of livestock land is unsuitable for growing crops. So, hey, let's rewild it and not put any food on it at all. I mean, that's just the biggest nonsense that I've ever come across. We need to be making sure, and we do produce enough food. We produce enough food currently for 10 billion people. So it's complete rubbish that livestock is competing for land resources that could be used to produce other food. That's the biggest nonsense that there is out there.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it is going to be a challenge, and some really interesting and great information you provided here. Chrissie, if people want to reach out or connect with you, where's the best place they can reach you?
I do have a Facebook account, a bit private, so people have to private message me. But if they look for Chrissie Wardle online, they'll find me. I do have an email address as well, so I can provide that if you want to put that in the information, because it's a bit long. It's authorhannahgraham@gmail.com. I have had people contact me since I did my last interview with Dave Mack. So yeah, I'm quite happy to take questions, and if people want to reach out, that's fine.
This is excellent. I'll make sure to post them in the description so people can reach out to you. Chrissie, thank you again for joining me. I really enjoyed hearing your story, perspective, and learning about your carnivore journey. I appreciate you taking the time to share. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for having me as well.